Southeastern Bow Hunter Podcast.
Boy, Mr. Bergy Bowsmith. Jesse can't say his last name. Bergunthries, I think is how it is. I should know because my last name's insane. So we're very similar in that aspect. But dude, what's going on, man? Tell the people who you are. I mean, I've known you for like a few months now, and you've helped me out, a lot with arrow setups, bow setups, questions about bows. Dude, honestly, we've covered pretty much everything off the podcast. So
Yeah. Yeah. My name is Jesse. I don't think anybody really calls me Jesse other than my fiance. Most people just call me Bergy. I am from southeastern Minnesota, born and raised, lived in Texas for a little while. Been shooting a bow since I was 5 years old. Been working on bows and like really shooting avidly since I was about 12 or 13. And so I'm 27 now. So you're looking at about almost 15 years, almost 2 decades of
yeah.
bow work and, shooting at a higher level. What I do is essentially I'm a specialty archery shop. I'm not a shop that you can walk in the door and, buy a bow off the rack and go shoot in the range. Everything I do is by appointment. Actually, about 85% of my customers come from out of state, and they ship their bows to me. I restring them and then tune them and send the bow back. But the difference between like what I do and what a standard pro shop would do is everything I do is bare shaft tuned out to 15 yards. So every single bow that comes into me at Bergy Bowsmith, it does not leave until everything is set running right down the center of the bow and bare shaft tuned to 15 yards with a perfect bullet hole through paper. And with this method that I do, in the 5 years that I've had Bergy Bowsmith, I've only had two bows in 5 years come back with an issue. And one of the two issues was actually the customer's fault. But I still took care of him. And then the other issue was my fault. And I owned up to it. I said, "Hey man, we'll get you taken care of." And got him taken care of. But I have never ever had a callback on anything outside of those two. I've never had an issue, never had a callback on any of the work that I've ever done. So I actually offer a 1 year warranty on my tune. No other shop does that. I also offer a 1 year warranty on the strings that I use as far as peep twist, stretch, serving separation, all that stuff. Again, something that not a lot of shops offer. I'm a little bit more expensive than like if you go to your local pro shop, but the quality that you get afterwards, in my opinion, is better. Obviously, I'm going to say that because it's my business, it's my baby. But on the flip side of the coin, I haven't had any complaints about the way I do things, and it's all backed by data. It's not opinion based. Nothing I do is opinion based. It's all backed by data and facts. And so for me, that is what is most important to me is just creating better bow hunters. The other thing that I do that's just a little bit different than most pro shops is you're not just a number to me. Once I send that bow back to you, if you got problems, hit me up. Like I'm not going to nickel and dime you to fix those problems and help you with those problems. Like hit me up, we'll get you taken care of. And I just want you to shoot as good as possible. I'm not going to charge you again until you get another bow and need another set of strings. That's just the way I operate. It's the way I've always operated. I just take care of the people that take care of me. So
Dude, that's wild. I didn't know all that. And gosh, man, you've been holding all this stuff in for the past 3 months.
yeah,
That's crazy.
it's different. It's definitely different, and it can be a lot to kind of try to explain to somebody why they should use me versus a pro shop. And I always tell people like you got to be comfortable with whoever's working on your bow if you're not working on it. So if you're more comfortable taking it to your pro shop, by all means, go to your pro shop. You don't need me.
Yeah.
But if you don't necessarily trust your pro shop, I'm a big proponent of there's a lot of false information that kind of just goes around the internet, just in general, any
Mhm.
topic, or not even just archery specific, but there's a lot in archery from people that, necessarily don't have the data to back up what they're saying. And I always tell people, if you do want to go to your pro shop and you think that there's a problem, like ask the tough questions, ask them the hard questions of why they're doing certain things and why they're not doing it the other way. And that'll determine whether your shop is going to do the type of work that you want.
Yeah, man. I mean, what's funny about this whole conversation really is I swore off bow shops for a while there when I first started. Because I started, what are we in 2024? So 5 years ago, bow hunting. And well, I say that I got my first bow 5 years ago. Let's just put it that way. And I didn't know what I was doing, right? Like it was a $280 bow from Cabela's, Whisker Biscuit, cheap little $35 5 pin Trophy Ridge Joker sight or whatever it was. Or no, it wasn't the Joker, it was the Volt. And that thing, I probably went through about three of those just because the pins kept breaking, right?
Right.
Did the one thing I should have never done. I went to the bow shop and said, "Hey guys, I'm brand new. I don't know anything about this. Set me up." And I walked out of there after spending $250 on new arrows, getting it set up. I had never pulled a bow back in my life, right? So this thing is already set at 70 pounds. I'm like, I know I can't pull that back. I've already tried. It's not going to work. So I told the guy, thankfully, he isn't there anymore. I told the guy, hey, can you set it to 55? So I go to pull it back. It sounds like my shoulder tears up. Like literally, if you took a bag of chips and just crumpled it, that was my shoulder. And so I look at him and I'm like, this might be too much. So I say,
Mm,
can you drop it to 50? He drops it to 40 without telling me. Right. So I'm thinking this entire time I'm pulling 50 pounds back.
right.
I get my arrows. They weigh three between 330 and 350, I think. Right. And I don't know anything
Hmm.
about arrow weight.
Right.
I'm so smart that I get a Rage 2.3 extreme cut on contact and I go hunting with this.
Right.
40 pounds, 350 grain arrow, 2.3-inch broadhead. Thankfully, nothing ever stepped in front of me because I would have probably stopped right then and there because I didn't know any better.
Right.
And so as time goes on, I'm getting better and better and more accurate, whatever. Season's already over. So I'm shooting every day. And I'm like, all right, this, whatever this is weight wise, I'm thinking it's 50 still. Um, I was like, this is a little too easy. I'm going to bump it up. So I didn't know how to do it. So I go up to another shop because at this point, like the guy, that I had used beforehand, I didn't really care for him. Like he kind of just sort of brushed me off and whatever. So I went to a different bow shop and said, hey, can you bump it up to 55? I think it's at 50. That's when I found out it was at 40. So I'm pissed. I was like, I am done with these guys. I'm not going back. And these are like, still well-known dudes. And I've become friends with
Hmm.
a lot of them after that one guy left. They've worked on Lee Ellis's bows, Jay Maxwell's bows, Drew's bows. Um, got the whole Seek One crew set up, right? And so I really expected good stuff out of this. Long story short, like I said, I'm friends with those guys now. Can go up there anytime, and I know that what I'm getting is good. Like it's not. I'm not
Right.
fed a bunch of lies, but I'm sure I'm not the only guy that's dealt with that. So like hearing you say, you pretty much put in the effort that's needed at every bow shop in your one personal bow shop for everyone that comes to you. That's refreshing, dude. People need to take that model and run with it because that is
Well,
amazing.
and I see it from both sides. I understand it from both sides. I worked in a pro shop for
Yeah.
years. So like I get it. They make their money by getting people in and out the door, and I was just having a conversation with a buddy of mine, a customer of mine actually. And I was like, I think what the problem is a lot of these people, they start their shop with the good intentions, right?
Mhm.
They start with really, really good intentions, and then they get a little bit more money in their pocket than they're used to. And then it's like, I need a new truck, or I want a new house, or I want to go on this hunting trip. And then next thing you know, $10,000 extra a month is nothing. I need $30,000 to keep up with my lifestyle. And now it's like, all right, now we got to send customers in and out this door as fast as possible so I can make as much money as possible so I can keep living the lifestyle I want to live.
Yeah.
And the thing with me is like, dude, me and my fiance, our dream house is a two-story basic ranch style house with a single pitch roof, a three-stall garage, a shop on 2 acres.
Yeah.
Enough room that, my dog can play. We can shoot bows in the yard. We can have 3D targets. And then in the shop, I already have plans for, I'm not going to get into that because it's secret.
I won't tell anybody.
But in the shop, we're gonna have a good size range in the shop that'll be membership based, just like going to the gym. So, like 24-hour gym. This is gonna be a 24-hour range with a
Yeah.
shop attached to it with a separate door that'll lock. And then I can actually have like a retail space because right now everything is by appointment.
Mhm.
But I mean, that's down the road, but like I don't want to live a lavish lifestyle. I just want to shoot bows and help people become a better bow hunter. And so for me, I do work a full-time job on top of this. And um really all Bergy Bowsmith does is pay for my archery addiction and my hunting trips. So
Yeah.
like it means more to me to make sure that everybody is set up properly and correctly than it does for me to get people in and out the door with lackluster results.
Yeah.
I always use the phrase good enough to hunt. I hate that phrase. I hate when a pro shop goes, oh, yeah, that's good enough. No, it's not good enough to me until bear shafts are perfect through paper at 15 yards. And my results speak for themselves. So we can talk about data all day, but um, I've never ever had a problem with the way I do it, and I've never had a customer have a problem. I get a lot of people that say the customer has to be the one to shoot the bow. Not really. It's not really a
Oh,
thing. It's something that pro shops have kind of drove into people's mind, and they
yeah.
think that that's the way it is, and it's just not that way anymore. I mean, these things are machines. A bow is a machine, and it is designed to shoot in one location, the most forgiving and the most accurate and the most efficiently. And if you
Mhm.
take it out of that to fix poor form, it's going to be less forgiving overall. Even
Yep.
if that person's getting a bullet hole and it's not set up dead center, it's going to be less forgiving than if you just set it up dead center and had a tear.
I hope that people listening know why I laughed when you said that because I know exactly why you brought
Mhm,
that up.
mhm.
I agree with you, and I do because I had that experience. And I will say though, I am guilty, of saying, "Oh, it's good enough to hunt." Mainly because that was during that time I wasn't going to. I literally the bow I just got rid of before I got my obsession. Never paper tuned it. I went
Right.
everything based off my eye. Took my because I was shooting a whisker biscuit at first, and I switched over to a drop away. Did everything by eye. Did straight down the middle, sighted it in. Everything was good. It was single cam, so I didn't have to worry about cam lean and all that stuff as much. And at least I don't think I did. I never had any problems. And dude, I got so many like buddies and just even listeners sometimes when I would talk about it. They're like, "Oh, well, you need to go paper tune it." I'm like, "Do I?" Because I'm shooting a fixed blade and a field point at the same spot. The flight's good. They're not hitting sideways. Everything looks fine. So
Right.
but I have learned since then that paper tuning is a lot more important. And what you said that blew my mind was you bear shaft tuned to 15 yards. Now I've tried bear shaft tuning
Hmm.
and I gave up on it. I was like, you know what? I can't do this. So
Right.
how do you do that? What kind of magic do you throw in there?
There's no magic. I always tell people, we'll kind of start with the paper tune, right? And some people are of the mindset paper tune is a starting point, right? And I actually have an article coming out pretty soon on this topic. So, a little sneak peek for your viewers and listeners
There we go.
here. Not all paper tears are the same.
Mhm.
Now, if we take and you stand at 3 yards and you shoot a fletch shaft and a bear shaft through paper at 3 yards, and both are bullet holes, that's a starting point. Okay. Now, if you back up and you take that same tear that's a bullet hole at 3 yards and you go to 12 yards, I can almost guarantee you it's not going to be a bullet hole. Unless you just got really, really lucky
Mhm.
and it's a bullet hole. But you're probably going to have a slight right or a slight left or a knock high or knock low.
On either
And
arrow or
just, in general,
okay.
assuming that you've knock tuned everything and they're all shooting the same,
Yeah.
you're going to have some sort of tear and you need to tune that out. Now that is kind of subjective to what your bow offers. If you have yokes, if you have shims, if you have top hats like a Matthews, if you have the set technology or deadlock, and now we're going to take the same mentality as broadhead tuning, right? So like when you broadhead tune, a lot of people start moving their rest, right?
Mhm.
You shoot a fixed blade and then you shoot a field tip and your fixed blade's to the left. That would indicate a knock right tear because it's
Mhm.
the broadhead is impacting to the left. So we're going to follow the broadhead and we're going to move the rest to the left a couple clicks, right? We're going to
Hmm.
take that same mentality, but we're just going to do it with the cams instead of the rest because your rest is already set dead center at 13/16. I don't want to move it out of center. So let's move your cams, right? Now, if you have yokes, you can put a twist into the right yoke or into the left yoke, whatever you need to do. And then shoot again until that bear shaft is shooting true. And then once it's shooting true at 12 yards, typically I'll take the other 11 arrows out of my dozen and I'll shoot all of them at 12 yards and I'll just start rotating the arrow until they all shoot bullet holes. And then I'm going to go back to 15 yards and I'm going to shoot again. And I'm going to shoot them all through paper until they're all shooting bullet holes. And I have never, ever bear shafted an arrow at 15 yards, put wraps on, fletched them, shot broadheads and field tips, and not have them hit together.
Hmm.
Never. And for the listeners, like, mind you, I'm a left-handed archer, okay? And I tune right-handed bows. 95% of the bows I tune are right-handed.
Yeah.
And I can still stack fixed blades and field tips on a right-handed bow out to 80 yards as long as I bear shaft tune at 15 yards and I get a perfect bear shaft. Those broadheads will stack. And I've shot against a hooter shooter. For those that don't know what a hooter shooter is, it's a mechanical shooting device that shoots the bow the exact same every single time. I've shot against the hooter shooter right-handed and left-handed. I get the same tear as the hooter shooter. I don't know if it's just because I've been shooting a bow for a long time or I just have really consistent form or what it is, but I can shoot right-handed just as good as I can shoot left-handed. I'm just left-eye dominant. So on my personal bow, I shoot left-handed.
Yeah.
Um, and when you do it that way, there's no magic secret sauce. It's just taking the time to, make sure that everything is running down the center. Because if you start moving that rest out of center, you're losing forgiveness. You might still get good flight, but
Mhm.
you're going to lose forgiveness. Now, on some systems like the Prime Black, you can't shim those. So, like, just sometimes they just end up not tuning down the center sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, or like on older like switchbacks, sometimes they just don't tune down the center. But you have to know that going into it that, hey, this specific bow, in my experience, sometimes they don't tune down the center. But if it has shims or it has yokes, 100% of the time, it is going to tune right down the center as long as you're taking the right steps. You're going through the right motions to get to that point. It
Yeah.
will tune down the center.
I might need to make the trip up to Minnesota, man, because I, I every time I've ever like tuned for broadheads, I've always moved the rest. Not
Mhm.
much, just barely, right? And
And
my thing, so you kind of got me questioning the method I've always done because you were saying when you like broadhead tune, people move the rest, and you would say like, all right, if it's hitting left, you move it left, like you follow it, right?
right,
I've seen the opposite though. And
right,
I've heard both things and I've tried both things. And the thing that I've found, works for me is say it's that same scenario and the broadhead hits left. Well, I move the rest right. And then the broadhead is now hitting where I'm aiming at. And the field tip is sometimes this was on my old bow, but the field tip would hit a little right. And I would just sight back in. It was kind of a big thing
right.
that I struggled with, right? And
Hmm.
eventually, like when I got this new obsession, I was able, same exact method, but once I moved the rest and got the broadhead hitting right, the field point was hitting exactly the same spot. So like, what's the real way to do it? Do you move if you're going to move the rest? Do you move the rest to where the broadhead's going, or the opposite?
So I look at everything in archery as if it's going through paper.
Okay.
Okay. So if a broadhead is impacting left, that means it's coming out of the bow knock right. So I'm going to make my adjustment to a knock right tear. Even if it's a micro tear, with a big broadhead, that's going to be exponential
Oh yeah.
downrange, right? So I look at everything in tuning in the simplest way because you can get caught up. I've never walk back tuned. I've never French tuned. I've never done any of those other tuning methods. I just shoot a bear shaft out to 15 yards, get a perfect bullet hole, screw my broadheads on, and I go shoot. And occasionally I will have one where at 80 yards, my broadhead is 2 inches left or 2 inches right of my field tips. And then in that instance, usually if I have a yoke system, I'm going to make the adjustment to my yoke before I start moving my rest. Otherwise, then it's 1 or 2 clicks on my rest and I'm done. I've never had to move a rest like more than 5 clicks,
Mm-hmm.
ever, like
Yeah.
ever. And so the way I do everything from start to finish is if I have a naked bow, a bare bow, I'm gonna put the rest on. I'm gonna get the arrow that I plan on shooting. I'm gonna set everything up dead level through the center of the burger hole. And depending on the manufacturer spec and depending on the manufacturer in general, I'm gonna set the center shot to whatever the manufacturer recommends. Whether it's 13/16, some manufacturers are 7/8. Some manufacturers are somewhere in between. I'm just gonna set it up to whatever the manufacturer recommends, which is typically 13/16. So I'm gonna set it to 13/16. And then the next thing I do before I do anything is I swap the strings out. I swap the strings out, I put new strings on, and then I set the bow to spec, and then I again re-level that arrow, get it perfectly level, tie my knock sets, tie my D loop in, and then the next thing I do is I lay the bow, I put the bottom cam on my boot and I look at the limb pocket and you'll see your limb bolt and I'll line both limb bolts up with the rest in the up position and an arrow in it. And you can see if that arrow is like tracking right down the center of the bow or if it's kind of favoring out to the left or if it's favoring out to the right. And if the bow is in spec and my rest is at center shot and it's tracking one way or another, then I know that I'm probably going to have to shim somewhere. I'm probably going to have to shim somewhere. So then I'll go up and I'll check my cams and see what my cam lean is. And I always want it to where the cam, if you lay an arrow on the cam, I want it to intersect the string at the D loop. So where the bottom cam, if you lay an arrow on it and you lay an arrow on the top cam, they should cross in an X or somewhat of an X, right over the D loop and in my experience, what that usually ends up in is uh, it basically at full draw, that means that the cams will be perfectly in line with each other. They'll be straight and in line, which a couple other content creators talk about that. And it is important, but you don't have to check it at full draw. You can check it at rest if you know how to check it.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people don't. And so next I'll get the cam lean to where I want it. I'll shoot it through paper. And once I shoot it through paper, let's just say I get a knock right tear. Next thing I'm going to do is I always start with the top cam. I don't know why. I've always done it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm going to shim the top cam to the right. I follow the tear. So I always follow the knock side of the tear. So if it's knock right, I'm going to move the top cam to the right. So I'm going to move whatever the smallest adjustment I can do, depending on the size of the tear, I'm going to move that cam to the right. I'm going to shoot it again. Let's say it's still knock right. Now I'll go to the bottom cam and then I'll shim the bottom cam over and I'll shoot it through paper. Again, we're doing this at 5 to 6 yards.
Yeah.
Now, boom, bullet hole. Okay, perfect. Now I'm going to back up. I'm going to go to 12 yards. I'm going to shoot through paper. still knock right. If I have yokes, I'm gonna, make an adjustment to the top yoke first. If that doesn't fix it, then I'll go to the bottom. If that doesn't fix it, I'll go back to the top, and I just go back and forth, top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom. And then once I get a bullet hole at 12 yards, if I have to shim again, I'll shim again. Like if I go to 12 yards and it's like a 3-inch tear and
Mhm.
it was a bullet hole at 6 yards, I'm probably going to shim it again. Now if it's like less than an inch, I'm going to adjust that out with the yokes or set technology or deadlock or whatever the
Whatever they
manufacturer
have.
gives me.
Yeah.
Um, Now, once I get back to 15 yards, this is when I will start to micro adjust my rest. Okay. Um, and when I say micro adjust, I want to be clear when I explain this and tell people that when I say micro adjust my rest, I'm not going to take it out of spec because if you have a micro adjustable rest, you can move it up to about 5 clicks and you will still be in spec because it's plus or minus 13 sixteenths. So
Yeah.
you can favor one side or the other and still be in spec. I'm never going to take it out of spec, but I will ride that line if I have to, depending on what the bow wants. And now, if it still won't tune down the center, the only thing left to do is look at your limb deflection and make sure that your limbs are in the proper place. I've only ever had to swap limbs around a handful of times. Doesn't happen very often. I
Yeah.
can usually get a bow to tune with the shims that are on the bow and the limb in the orientation that they're already in right down the center. Um, and then, once it's at 15 yards, I don't wrap like electrical tape on my shafts. I just don't. A lot of people say, well, that'll change the dynamic spine. And you're right, it does. It
Really?
does change the dynamic spine having that extra weight on the back to mimic fletchings in a wrap.
Yeah, I
But
could
I
see
don't
that.
think it's enough to matter based on all the data that I have
Yeah.
that shows that when I bear shaft without a wrap or tape on the back to mimic that, I haven't had any changes that I've needed to make once I put a wrap and fletchings on. And I'll
Mhm.
tell you guys right now, I shoot very, very heavy fletchings. So if it was going to make a difference, it would make a difference with my max stealths. It just would. And I've never had a difference. And then once I get that, I'll bare shaft all of my shafts, whether it's 12, 24, 36, whatever I got. I'm going to bare shaft them all. I'm going to mark them. I will wrap them, fletch them, and then I will go back and I will shoot them all through paper with fletchings. Now, a lot of people go, well, why did you even bare shaft if you're going to shoot them through paper again with fletchings? I only do that because occasionally, if you have really, really consistent shafts, um, you can get them to bullet hole in multiple spots.
Mhm.
And once you put fletchings on, maybe instead of bullet holing in 3 positions, it'll only bullet hole in 2 positions.
Yeah.
So I'll just go through and I'll shoot them all again through paper and I'll knock tune them as needed. Typically, if I have 24 arrows, 20 of the 24 are going to shoot bullet holes right away. And 4 of them, I'm going to have to knock tune them a little
Tinker
bit,
with it.
which is whatever. And then the next thing I do is I go right out to 60 yards, broadhead field tip, shoot them. And um, I've never not had them impact together. Now, sometimes on my personal bow, I get really, really anal and like I have to be cutting fletchings at 60 yards
Yeah.
for me to call it good. So when I get to that point and I'm shooting broadheads and field tips, now I'm going to do one click one way or another to,
Yeah.
get those broadheads as close as possible at 60 yards. And then I go right to 80, 90, 100, and then I call it good and it's done. So that's, a 10,000 foot overview of my start to finish process of how I tune a bow. Obviously, depending on the bow, there can be some little nuances in there, but pretty much that's how I do it.
Yeah. That whole time I was kind of thinking like if I sent you my obsession, because I'm pretty sure mine, I'd have to look at it, but I'm pretty sure when I took it, um, I know that they shimmed it. And what was funny about it is the guy that set it up for me actually helped design that bow. I didn't know this at the time. And he was at Obsession when they built this bow. And so he's doing all this stuff and I'm pretty sure it's got one yoke on the top and
Mhm.
nothing on the bottom. So the
Yeah,
whole
it's a
time you were
hybrid.
saying that, what?
Yeah, it's a hybrid cam system.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So
My
the whole time I'm
fiance
like, what
shoots a
would you
hybrid.
do? Like, if I sent you my bow, would you do the shims first? Would you yoke it? Like, but
Yeah,
you kind
I
of
would
answered
shim
that.
it first. I would shim it first. My fiance, she shoots a hybrid cam system bow as
Yeah,
well. I shim it first, and then once I'm at 12 to 15 yards, then I'll start yoke tuning it.
gotcha.
And you know, just a like a testament to my method, my fiance's only been shooting a bow for a year, and um she'd never picked up a bow before in her life, ever.
Hmm.
And like we just shot league tonight, a 3D league, 40-yard max, and she shot a 290. And
Jeez.
she's shooting 4 millimeters at 50 pounds, 26-inch draw, and she's shooting a 290 on a 3D course as
With
somebody who's
four
only been
millimeter?
shooting, yeah, with 4 millimeters.
Oh,
And
gosh.
you know, I'm not taking any credit away from her, but she does
Yeah.
not have perfect form.
Yeah.
She does still make mistakes. I mean, everybody will. She's only been shooting a bow for a year, but her broadheads impact with her field tips out to 50 yards, which is her maximum effective range every single time. Even when she has a form breakdown, they impact together because her bow is set up in its most forgiving, efficient, accurate position, and
Yeah.
I can fix the shooter. You take that bow out of that forgiving uh, place, and now you start running into problems of like, if you do make a bad shot, it's more detrimental than if you had the bow set up in that most forgiving position, if that makes
That's
sense.
crazy. That's so wild with 4 millimeter, man. That makes me feel like crap. I've been shooting
She
for,
kind of scares me when I have to shoot against her. I'm like, oh
yeah,
gosh,
dude.
you
Like
know.
when we did ASA last year, I think my score was like high 180s. And that's that I thought I did pretty good. But
Yeah,
you touched
she's
on
a beast.
it, yeah, clearly. It just makes me, as soon as I get this new site, I'm gonna shoot every single day. uh Man, you touched on something a little earlier though about like your arrow weight and what you do in the back of it. I'm actually I've got some arrows being built by Q right now that I'm going to be running those max stealth,
Hmm.
and I'm trying to. And I guess we can segue into like arrow weight and all the crazy stuff. Like you're probably the fourth person I've had on here that I will talk, arrow weight builds with and how important it is. We had Troy, we had Josh, we had Tim Gillingham. Like we had three guys that all shoot completely different things.
Yeah.
I'm trying to stick somewhere between 435 and 450. And
Hmm.
you and I have talked about this a bunch, but what is your, ideal arrow setup for the average guy? Like, because you and I are pretty similar in build and everything like that. So, like,
Yeah.
what would you, if I said, hey, Bergy, look, build me 12 arrows, whatever weight you want, I'm going to be running fixed blade. What do you got? What would you choose? Like, how would you build them?
So I personally lean a little on the heavy side. Um, on my personal setup and my fiance's setup, but not for the reasons that everybody thinks. It's not penetration based.
Not
It's
to break heavy bone.
strictly no, because in my opinion, as long as you have perfect arrow flight, you can blow through anything because you're going to get the maximum potential out of your system if you have perfect arrow flight and that arrow hits perfectly true because you bear shafted at 15 yards, you have
Mm-hmm.
perfect arrow flight, you're going to get the best penetration possible. Now, if you just start at 3 yards, paper tune, and then go in broadhead tune, your arrows, the broadheads might hit with field tips, but it might not be impacting perfectly square to that medium, and you are losing penetration when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
So I personally right now I'm shooting like 533 grains and 16% FOC. I shoot that because I like my bow to be a little bit slower because I err on the side of quietness and forgiveness. And for me, like I've just shot anywhere. I have a short draw length. I'm a 28-inch draw length. I shot speed bows for a long time. I don't shoot speed bows anymore. I tend to shoot slower cammed bows
Mhm.
that have long brace heights because I want the accuracy. I want the forgiveness. And so I'm shooting a 7 1/8 inch brace height, 330,
Jeez.
334 IBO bow at 77 pounds and 533 grain arrow, and I'm shooting like 258 feet per second.
Damn,
So
dude.
it's not a screamer by any means, but I like a slower arrow because I'm short. I'm 5'7". I'm 170 pounds. When I go out west, 9 times out of 10, when a mule deer stands up out of his bed, that sagebrush is in the way, and I don't want to
Mhm.
shoot through it. I want to just barely skirt over the
Go
top
over
of
it.
it. And so that's why I just try to slow my setup down a little bit. Because in the tree stand, I don't have a problem with a slow arrow because you're shooting downhill. I
Mhm.
don't think it matters that much. Now, if a random person or a random customer was like, "Hey, man, this is what I do. What are you going to build me?" I would probably lean somewhere between 470 and 515 grains is probably where I'm going to have them end up because, and the reason I say that is because you're going to have a perfect blend of good penetration if you do hit something hard with perfect arrow flight, but you're also going to get that perfect blend of like the bow is going to start really quieting down
Mhm.
and it's going to get a lot quieter and it's going to be a little bit more forgiving. And so for me, that's kind of like my money zone is, 470 to 515. Yes, I am a little bit higher than my money zone, but I'm also shooting a really heavy GPI shaft right now. And it's just something I'm trying out this year. But above all else, durability. I will not shoot an arrow without a sleeve. Without a sleeve, I won't do it. I've just the arrow's not doing you any favors if it breaks right behind the insert. So I
Mhm.
always have a sleeve on every single arrow I've ever shot. Every arrow my wife will ever shoot or fiance will ever shoot will always have a sleeve, whether it's a 10 grain sleeve or a 50 grain sleeve, I don't really care as long as it has a sleeve. Whether it's a 4 millimeter, 5 millimeter, whatever, I
Mhm.
need it to have a sleeve because I want that arrow to survive. Once it hits, I want it to survive and I want it to go through. If it bends, whatever. I don't care if it bends
Yeah, it's
as
still
long as
together.
it doesn't break, as long as it doesn't break. If it bends, cool, whatever. I can knock the insert out and put a new one in.
Mhm.
But as long as it doesn't break, that's my thing. But for the general public, I think, anywhere from like that, I would even venture to say, 450 to 515, you're going to be more than fine. The reason I say 470 is because I think the general population is somewhere in the 27 to 29-inch draw length range
Mhm.
and you're not getting any favors on speed anyways.
Yeah.
So you might as well just, bump up the weight a little bit, have a little bit more of a security clearance and run it that way. You and I have touched on this before. I mean, the difference between 290 feet per second and 260 feet per second at 80 yards is milliseconds.
Yeah.
It's literally milliseconds. And I don't think that matters. I really don't. If you have a good arrow that's flying good and your bow is tuned properly, I just don't think it matters.
Yeah, I mean that's been a thing, because I've been bouncing back and forth. Like a couple months ago, I was gonna do, over five, like basically your weight right now. And what's blowing my mind is you have a longer draw length than me, which is wild. And I think I'm like 5'8" or something. Maybe I got like little
Well,
T-Rex arms or something.
my my bow is set at 28, but
Yeah,
it actually measures just over 27 and a half because I'm running 80% mods.
I gotcha. Okay,
So
so
I
we're
run I
basically the
run
same.
really yeah, I run really, really low let off. My holding weight is like 22 pounds on my hunting bow. Like
Jeez, man.
I run a pretty low hold. I'm actually thinking about getting different mods and going down to like a 70% let off. But that's just what I like.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
like that. And for me it works and I hold really good like that.
yeah.
Like if I were to show the general public my hunting bow, they would think I'm insane. I mean, I'm running 10 ounces of weight on my back bar. I'm running 4 ounces of weight on my front bar, and I hunt with that in the mountains. I hunt with it in a saddle. It doesn't matter what I'm hunting. I have 14 ounces of weight on my bars
Huh.
total, and so it's like it just
That's
works for
interesting.
me. It holds like a rock,
Yeah.
and it just works.
Yeah, I
So
mean, I agree too. Like you were saying, you would never hunt without a sleeve now. I mean, I felt like you were speaking directly to me when you said that because I had an arrow break in a deer last year because where the insert, connected with the carbon, it broke. And
right.
that deer's still alive. I still see her all the time. And
Hmm.
then now I've got these Nimrod Yeti arrows and they've got a sleeve and I've hit hard stuff with it and I haven't had any issues. So to anyone listening, a sleeve will save you 100%. I mean,
Yeah. And 9 times out of 10, if you do hit something hard and you have a sleeve on your system, and now you have a wobble, 9 times out of 10, it's just the sleeve. If
yeah,
you replace the sleeve, the insert is usually fine. Sometimes the insert will bend, but 9 times out of 10, it's just the sleeve is bent, and then you just pull the sleeve off, put a new sleeve on, and you're good to go again. And
yeah.
you can keep right. I had up until I switched arrows this year, my number one arrow in my quiver was in my quiver for like 9 years. It had like 17 animals
Good
under
Lord.
it. Like I had shot a ton of animals with it. I had replaced the sleeve a couple times, but it still spun perfectly true.
Yeah.
I had hit multiple, I think I tallied it up because I keep a journal of everything that I shoot.
Hmm.
What the animal was, what day it was, the weather, the precipitate, like if it was it raining, what time of day, was it a doe, was it a buck, where the shot was, what bone it went through, how far the deer went, what broadhead, what arrow weight, all this stuff. I track all of that stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, for everything I've ever killed since I was 15 years old, I've done that. And
Dang, dude.
um
You're doing that at 15?
yeah, I've always
Jeez.
kept a journal. I like writing. I'm just not, I lose motivation. I get writer's block.
Yeah.
And so like I'll start like on my website, I have like 9 blogs wrote right now that are
Yeah.
just not finished. They're just like half finished, because it's like I start writing and then I'm like, I think of something else. I'm like, oh, I gotta start another article. And then I just
Yeah.
start something else. And that arrow had been through like 17 or 15 animals and like over 20 bones it had been through, and it was still spinning perfectly true. And I had shot like 4 different broadheads on that thing.
Yeah.
I had shot mechanicals, I had shot fixed blades, I had shot single bevels, I had shot a ton of different broadheads on that shaft, and it worked just fine.
Hmm.
It shot great. The label was pretty beat up, but
Yeah.
I mean it shot great. And so for me, like it's just like I'm a creature of habit. I don't steer away from things that have shown me in the past that they work very, very well. And for me, it's a long bow, lots of weight on my stabilizers, a 3-pin horizontal pin, and a longer ATA, and then anywhere from the 500 to 533 for me.
Yeah.
Um, and I've heard a lot of people say that you shouldn't shoot deer past 50 yards over 500 grains. I shot my mule deer 2 years ago with a 60-pound bow at 82 yards with a 544 grain arrow, blew right through it with a
Good
mechanical.
Lord.
And
With a mechanical?
yeah,
Jeez, man.
it's that deer that's right up there. And it was a muley, shot him at 82 yards. He was perfectly broadside. Deer ran 20 yards, tipped over. I watched him tip over
Wow.
and blew right through him. And I've on the flip side of the coin, I've shot deer at 20 yards and shot them a little bit high and not had my arrow pass through and had
Hmm.
them roll over and break it.
Yeah.
It's just it is what it is.
It's always
You
different.
know, yeah, things happen. Everything's always different. So like I always just kind of lean on my past experiences and for a lot of people don't know this. Like I've never ever hunted with a gun ever. Like I've never killed anything with a gun.
Dang.
Uh, so like growing up, my dad was a felon. So we didn't have guns
Yeah.
growing up. If we wanted to hunt, we had to, especially with dad, we were bow hunting. Like you
Yeah.
had to bow hunt. So I've been shooting a bow my whole life. Like that's all I ever knew was bows. I never shot a gun. I mean I've shot guns now,
Yeah.
but
Never hunted
I've
with one.
I've never hunted with one. I've
Huh.
never had the urge to hunt with one. I And so for me it was just like like I just from 15 on forward, I just started documenting and changing to the results that I was getting until I started learning a lot more, and then I could make more educated decisions on what I was doing.
Yeah. That's
So
crazy, dude. I mean, I've only killed one animal with a gun, and then after that, I'm not proud to say, but I did switch to a crossbow because it was gifted to me, and then that became. See, my opinion on like gun hunting versus bow hunting is I don't care what someone does.
as long as
But
it's legal.
yeah, I have no interest in hunting with a gun. Like I've had plenty.
Yeah.
Like one of my buddies, one of my best friends, that is a complete killer. Right, every single season, every season. He's, say I'll have like a big buck on camera and he's like, oh man, I'd take the gun on that one. A buck like that, I wouldn't take the chance. I'm like, no, see, that's the thing is like, I enjoy the challenge. If I kill him, I get more out of that by shooting an arrow through him than shooting him at 200 yards. He never even knew I was there.
Right.
So I'm with you on that. And like, I've had family members say the same thing and I tell them the same stuff. I'm like, this is what I enjoy. It's fun. It's harder,
Yeah.
which gives more enjoyment to me. Um, yeah, man, I don't know that. See, the arrow thing is, I've got you on now. I've got T-Bone coming on next week, and I think I'm going to be done with the arrow discussions for a while because what I've kind of gathered from it is everybody's different, and the one thing that I have completely just taken to the bank, and I can argue it with anybody. Arrow weight's important. Arrow flight is definitely the most important. But as far as the arrow is concerned, the most important thing is the broadhead. Am I?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, your broadhead is definitely important. I mean, a lot of people, I just had this conversation with a guy yesterday. He was like, "Oh, I don't think I'm going to run aluminum uh inserts." And I was like, "Well, what broadhead are you shooting?" And he was like shooting some it was a fixed blade. I can't remember exactly what it was. But it had an aluminum ferrule on it. And
Mm,
I was like, "So wait a minute. It's okay for you to run a broadhead with an aluminum ferrule, but you won't run an insert that's aluminum?" I said,
yeah.
"Make that make sense to me." And he's like, "Well, I guess I didn't think of it that way." I said, "Yeah, you're worried all about this durability, but now you're going to shoot an aluminum ferrule." I
Yep.
said, "That doesn't make sense to me." I said, "Well, what if your broadhead fails and your arrow survives? Do you consider that a success or a failure?" He goes, "Well, I guess I didn't think of it like that." And I said, "Yeah."
Hmm.
I said, "So if it's not good enough for your insert, why would it be good enough for your ferrule?" Right? And he's like, "Okay, okay, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to switch broadheads," and ended up switching broadheads. And now he's like not so worried about it. But
Yeah.
like for me, like stainless steel ferrule, like that's a given for me. Like
Yep.
it has to have a stainless steel ferrule. Now granted, I shot a lot of animals with the Magnus Stinger, which
Yeah.
has an aluminum ferrule. But I also broke a lot of Magnus broadheads. I killed everything I shot at with them,
Yeah.
but I broke a lot of ferrules with that, and they're cheap. I mean, they're
Oh
cheap
yeah.
broadhead. And I hate saying cheap because they're not poorly made. They're just inexpensive.
Yeah. The price is lower.
Yeah, the price is lower. But yeah, broadhead is definitely super important. And components are super
Hmm.
important. Other than those two things, you can shoot whatever shaft you want as long as you go through my process of bare shafting at the 15 yards, knock tuning, and making sure every arrow is flying the same. You're going to have good results with whatever arrow you decide to shoot as long as you got good components and a good broadhead. So I normally don't jump into any conversations when people are talking arrow weight because one, half the people are just regurgitating something that they read somewhere, and the other half of people are just speaking their opinion, not a
Hmm.
fact. As long as you got perfect arrow flight, I'm pretty positive that you could shoot through anything in North America at 450 grains
Well,
with
and I
a
feel like
mechanical.
not even just 450, but what you were saying earlier about what you've seen and what you've used that has worked for you. If you look at the past 3 episodes with guys where I talked to them about this, like I, sounded off earlier, you've got Troy who pushes 550 and higher. You've got
Mhm.
Josh Jones who pushes 400 to 450, sometimes 475. Then you got Tim who's pushing under 400 sometimes. So what does that tell
Right.
you? You can go from 350 to 1,000 and you can still kill them. And it leads
Right.
me back to what T-Bone always says that I know he's going to say on the next episode is accuracy always wins. And
Right.
that to me is like, I went down this whole rabbit hole, man. He was getting on my nerve, or I was getting on his nerves because at one point I was like, all right, man, can you build me like, this next set of arrows I get, can I get them at like 550? And he was like, all right, yeah, we can do that. A week later, I'm like, hey, can we do like 450? He's like, yeah, that's fine. Another week later, I'm like, can we do like 435? And he was like, dude, what are you gonna choose? I'm like, I don't know, man. 435 or 475. Anything in that, I'm happy.
Right.
And
And I think a lot of people, and this is across the board with archery, and not just arrow weight. I think a lot of people put too much effort into stuff that just doesn't matter.
mm-hmm.
It's just, now granted, it all matters to a point, but like I have a buddy that is like religious about messaging me. He's like, all right, man, should I shoot 500 grains or 490 grains? I'm like, bro, it doesn't matter. I'm like,
10 grain difference.
whatever one. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I'm like 2 feet per second faster with the other arrow. And I was like, yeah, big whoop. Like, who cares? Like, just shoot whatever one shoots better. Like,
Yep.
I don't care. Uh, I I was on a live on TikTok tuning a bow, and somebody was saying something about bear shaft tuning not being important or whatever. And I took my personal bow out, and I had like 7 arrows just like laying on my bench. All of them were different. All of them were different brands. All There was 3 or 4. I think there was 4 different spines. There was a 350, a 300, a 250, and a 200 on the bench. They were all cut anywhere from 26 inches to 29 inches. Some of them had a 150 grain insert with a 125 head. Some of them had a 20 grain insert with a 125 head. I stood at 15 yards. I shot all 7 of those arrows through paper, and all of them bullet holed. Every single one of them, every spine, every length. It didn't matter because my bow was in the most forgiving position possible.
With your 77
And
pounds?
yeah, they all
Wow.
shot just fine.
Huh.
And now the 350, if I put a broadhead on it, it probably would be a little squirrely.
Okay.
But with a field tip and bear shafted through paper, they were all shooting bear shafts perfect. And everybody's like, dude, that doesn't make sense. That's not repeatable. So I picked up a right-handed customer's bow that was in my shop, and I did it again and shot every single one of them through paper. And there's no way I can lie about this because it's literally on film. I
Yeah.
did it on film on TikTok. And there was like 70 people in the chat, and they're like, dude, there's no way. They're like, because everybody just goes back to thinking about what the general content creators and public has told them is
Mhm.
fact, even though it's not based around anything. It's
Yeah.
not based around any proven data that says that this can't happen, right? With no change in tune settings. I didn't change anything. I literally just picked them up, shot, picked up the next one, shot, picked up the next one, shot. I shot my arrow last because I didn't want to break my arrow. I didn't care about my shop arrows.
Yeah.
But like it was repeatable. It's forgiving. And when your bow gets to a point like that, you can literally just shoot anything and it is going to go where you want it to go. And it is the craziest, most absurd thing you'll ever see. I would venture to say that I have no way to prove this, but I would venture to say that 90% of archers are way better shots than they think they are.
Yeah.
Way better shots, and that their bow is holding them back because their bow isn't set up properly.
I mean, I've got a buddy, and it's funny you gave that whole example of like shooting different spines and different weights or whatever, because the same dude I was telling you about that always gives me crap for not hunting with a gun.
Mhm.
He bow hunts a lot, and he is like 6'2", 30-inch draw, 70 pounds, 72 pounds, something like that. And this man uses a 400 spine arrow full length. And I
Yeah.
just, when he told me that, and I started like at this point, I started learning about arrow builds and going down the ranch fairy hole, and then the lighter stuff, and talking to T-Bone, and just all this info coming in at once. I called him. I'm like, hey man, pretty sure you need to change your arrow spine. And he's like, well, why? So I explained it to him. Everything I thought I knew, right? And I was like, you're shooting 400. I think you should jump to 350 or 300. just try it out. And I've even still said this to him, and I probably should stop. But he goes, look, man, he's like, I'm not telling you you're wrong, but I've been bow hunting for 10 years, 12 years, whatever it was, maybe even longer than that. And he was like, I've mostly gotten pass throughs. My arrows never get super squirrely. I go to the same place and get it tuned. I just pick up a set of arrows. I don't even think about weight, and I just shoot them. He's like, I've always shot 400 spine, and it's always worked. And so I finally gave in. I was humbled, and I was like, all right, hey, if it works, man, it works. I'm not the authority here. I'm just regurgitating things I was taught, like what you just said. And so yeah, you're right. I mean, there's certain things, man, that you see and you're just like, how that factually that shouldn't work, but it does.
Right. And like there's another thing that like floats around on the internet lately of like, well, this bow prefers a weaker spine. No, it
Mhm.
doesn't. No, it doesn't. No bow prefers one spine over another. Like if they're tuned properly, you can shoot a multitude of spines and it will
Yeah.
be just fine. The odds are is that you're just like a click out of perfect, or 2 clicks out or whatever it is. And so I always tell people like, hey man, if it makes you feel warm and fuzzy, like shoot it. It is what it is.
Yeah.
But who am I to look at somebody and go, hey man, that's wrong. You shouldn't do that. Now, I could, on the flip side of the coin, I could say I probably tuned more bows than the average guy.
Yeah. Like you
And
know what
I
you're
can
talking
go,
about.
yeah, I know what I'm talking about. I have data to back it up. But if this guy is shooting XYZ arrow and XYZ broadhead at XYZ setup, and he's always getting pass throughs, he's killing animals, he's hitting them where his pin is, and he's having success, why would I tell him not to? Why would
Yeah.
I tell him to switch?
Why fix something that's not broken?
Yeah, why fix something that's not broken? If it works for him, it works for him.
Yep.
And that's the beauty of it. I always tell people there's only a handful of things in archery that are truly personal preference. And in my opinion, it's broadhead choice, it's sight choice, release choice, rest choice, and bow manufacturer and arrow
Yeah.
manufacturer. Other than that, everything else is proven in arrow weight. Everything else is a proven fact. Like you have to have the bow set up perfectly down the center
Yep.
to be the most forgiving and the most efficient, and you have to have a good tune. And arrow flight is king, and all this other stuff that is proven. Like that is a fact. You cannot. There's no negotiation on
Yeah.
that. Everything else, like hey man, if you want to shoot rage, shoot rage. If you want to shoot severs, shoot severs. If you want to shoot VPA, shoot VPA.
Yep.
I don't care. But as long as those other things are in play, you're going to be just fine.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's whatever you're
it,
confident with, you know?
right.
Like I
And
had a guy reach out to me 2 days ago and was like, hey man, I'm thinking about doing this build. And he was asking me a bunch of questions. I went back to what I know. And again, I'm not a bow tech. I could talk arrows all day long. That's, I've said it on the podcast before. When JD was on here, he was the bow guy and I was always the arrow guy, right?
Mhm.
Just because that's what I decided to learn more about. Because bows to me make no sense when someone
Well,
like
and
I
it's
just
it's a
learned.
progression. It's a
Yeah,
progression too.
like I just
Like
learned what yoke tuning is from you,
right,
right? Like
right.
I've been doing this for 4.5 years. I just learned what that is, and so he hit me up and he was like, I'm thinking about switching broadheads. I was like, well, dude, VPA all day, right? Like I love VPA. It's my favorite broadhead out there
Right.
because I'm confident with it. I had issues with mechanicals, shot a single bevel, had no problems. Well, he said he wanted to do mechanical. I was like, okay, well, if you want to go mechanical, you have 1,000 different things to choose from. My personal preference on that is the dead meat, mega meat, or any sever. If you want to go mechanical, those three are the ones that I suggest. But you can go rage. He showed me a photo of the Schwacker that he used. It was like a 3-inch cut. Dude, the freaking hole's, bigger than
Right.
that,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of Schwacker. I don't like the design, and
Mhm.
people like it. I'm not a huge fan of it. Whatever, it is what
Right.
it is, right? And I told him, I'm like, dude, if you got that, why would you switch? If you killed a deer with it and it worked well for you, why switch? And I haven't heard back from him. I don't know if I pissed him off or not, but
Right.
um, yeah, dude, like the whole, I agree with you. There's a lot of things that are up to choice. Broadheads. I change broadheads before we got with VPA. I change broadheads every month. I
Dude, I
gave
still do
broadheads
that.
away. Yeah,
I
like
still, I think
it's a
there's six
problem.
different. I think I have six different broadheads in my quiver.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah,
I
I like when I go hunting, it's a crapshoot what broadhead I'm killing something
just
with.
grab an arrow and
I just grab an arrow and whatever broadhead's on there. Like,
yeah.
all right, guess we're testing this one today. It's
Yep.
just like, and and I'll be honest, I didn't really heavily start shooting mechanicals until like 2 years ago. I was a fixed blade guy.
Mhm.
My dad kind of raised me of like, oh, there's so many failure points and this and that, and I was like, okay, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
But
That's been my
then
argument.
it was like, okay, but maybe my bow wasn't perfectly tuned. Maybe that's why people were failing.
Mhm.
A lot of people like to really crap on rage. And at the same time, I like to tell people, I'm like, think of it this way. Rage is the number one selling mechanical broadhead.
There's a
Okay.
reason for it.
Let's say they sell 100,000 Rage broadheads a year.
Mhm.
Okay. And let's say you hear 100 people say that they had a terrible experience and everybody writes off Rage and goes, oh my God, Rage is terrible. Well, there's still 99,900 people that didn't have a bad experience
Mhm.
with it. So it's like, is it really that bad, or is there just so many of them out there that we just hear about the bad more?
Yeah. And
Right.
you don't know what the situation was. They could have hit a shoulder. I mean, I've been guilty of it, man. I have crapped on rage before, and I don't know why. I think it's because I got in that whole thing where it was like, oh, rage this, rage that. But I'll tell you right now, this deer over here behind me, not the one on the wall, but the one sitting down, I shot him with a rage no collar. You know how far he
Mhm.
went? 10
Not
yards.
far.
10
Yeah.
yards and died like that. And
Right.
I've never seen a deer fall that close. I literally look out the ground blind and he's just laying there. And I'm like, did I shoot him with a gun? Like what happened? I've never
Hmm.
even the deer I shot with a gun went further than that. So
Right.
I agree. I mean, the thing is, man, like the whole
It all
broad
depends on how
thing.
you want to look at life. If you want to look at life
Yeah,
glass half full or glass half empty.
exactly.
And it's just like I try to look at everything glass half full. I've when I first switched over to mechanicals, I switched over to the Rages, or not Rages, Severs. I was
Yeah.
shooting Severs, and the first deer I shot with a Sever, the deer turned so fast and so hard. This is the second deer that's ever turned on me ever. And that deer turned so fast and so hard, the broadhead went in behind her ear
Mm,
and opened fully, went completely through her skull, out her jaw, and her head was like tucked right behind her shoulder, like in the
yeah.
golden triangle when it hit her, because she turned into me instead of away from me like they usually do.
Yeah.
The arrow kept going, went in her shoulder, went through her heart, and came out her armpit and buried in the ground. So she had a hole completely through her skull and her head, and then through her body and buried in the ground. And that deer ran 30 yards, tipped over, and died. Now, a year later, and then I ended up shooting my mule deer at 82 yards with that same broadhead that I just switched the blades on.
Mhm.
And a year later, I'm hunting mule deer and I forgot to take one of my broadheads out of practice mode, and
Mm,
I shot a mule deer at 80 yards with a 540 grain arrow, and the sever literally bounced off the deer.
mhm.
Bounced off the deer. He he was so enraged with like testosterone and like rutting that he just kept fucking up this tree. And so I knocked another arrow and I shot him again, and the second one blew right through him.
Yeah.
But after that point, that is when I switched away from sever, is because I was like, I cannot let
You
that
don't want
happen
to do
again.
that
Because what
again. Yeah.
happened was is I showed up to the spot, and it was a spot I had never been to. It was over Thanksgiving. It was a a hunt on a whim out of state. And I had my target. I took my target out, set it at 60 yards, put my broadhead into practice mode, launched one. Okay. Everything hit good. Bow traveled well, double checked everything, made sure, because I mark everything with a silver Sharpie. I mark my sight, I mark my rest, I mark
Mhm.
my elevation and my windage on my rest so that I don't have to remember where stuff was. As long as
Yeah.
the Sharpie marks line up, I know everything's good. And I checked all that. Everything was good. Pulled the arrow out, threw it right in my quiver, and went to the glassing spot.
Mhm.
Never took the set screw out. And I was just like, I
Mm.
cannot do that again, you know? And so
Yeah.
now I shoot a different head. Um, and
What are you shooting
it's
now?
just, I shoot Evolution Outdoors heads. It's
That
a,
the Jekyll and Hyde?
yeah, I shoot both of them. I shoot
God.
the Jekyll and the Hyde. Um, I shot a deer with the Hyde last year and cut her leg completely off,
Mm. Good
like
Lord.
completely off. I shot her. She was quartering away barely. I put the arrow right where I wanted it. It came out the bottom side and it hit like her elbow knuckle, and it's mechanical. It was wide open and it went through that knuckle and she ran off. Well, she limped off, and as she limped off, her leg was standing there like this and then just tipped over. And her leg from the elbow down, I cut it completely off. Um,
Wow.
that was insane. I've never seen anything like that.
I almost
And
feel
that's
bad
a
for
yeah, I mean, she died in like
Well, of course, yeah, but
7 or 10 yards. But
dang.
I mean, it cut her. She probably didn't even feel it, to be completely
Yeah.
honest with you. Like it was so fast and it
Jeez.
blew her leg completely right off. And um, Dale Perry over there at Evolution, he's a good dude. He's super smart, very, very smart, very, very knowledgeable. And I told him when I ordered those, I was like, because I called him before I ordered them, and I was like, hey Dale, I know you don't know me from Adam. I'm just a guy that tunes bows, and like I told you earlier, I'm a above average archer and a mediocre hunter. That just hunts really, really hard.
That
And
makes me wonder what I am then.
and I was like, I just want you to know, like, I am gonna mess these broadheads up. Like, I am gonna try to destroy them.
Yeah.
And his comment to me, he goes, "Haha, let me know how that goes." And then and then the conversation was over. And I can honestly say I've had great luck with them. I like them because they have a fixed blade and a mechanical option,
Yeah.
all in the same ferrule.
Yeah.
So I can swap them out however I want, but they have such a tight and small compact profile that they fly so good at long range. They just fly really, really good. So that's why I like them. But yeah, Dale, he's a funny guy. He's like, let me know how that goes.
That's funny.
So,
Yeah, I
but
mean,
yeah,
like with mechanicals, man, I want to try one. Like, I want to kill something with a sever, and I know that I've said it 1,000 times. I know we partnered up with VPA, and that's obviously what's going to be my quiver mostly. But we're going. I'm going hog hunting this summer, and I've got some severs from a couple years ago, and I'm like, dude, I want to see what happens. You know,
yeah, they're a
because
great head.
yeah, and I've
They
heard
are a
nothing but
great
good
head.
things. But like
My
my issue with mechanicals is because last season before the whole VPA stuff, I was shooting the mega meat. That was my mechanical. Like someone said, "Hey, what broadhead?" That's the broadhead I said because the deer over here on the wall killed him with one huge hole. He only went maybe 70 yards. Crazy blood trail, right? And this is with a bow that is
right,
not tuned, an arrow that is
right.
way underspined, 515 to 20 grains, right? Like I didn't get a pass through. It buried in the offside shoulder. Not really important. But so at that time, that was the broadhead I was going to use.
Mhm.
And dude, I was sitting in the stand. You probably know this story, but I was sitting in the stand, and this is the same broadhead, same exact broadhead, just different blades that I shot pickles with. And I had a doe at 25 yards. I drew back, wasn't nervous or anything. Shot, and the arrow went at least 8 or 9 inches to the right. And so I'm like, there's no way I pulled it that bad. I've pulled shots before, but not like that. So,
Right.
you know, obviously gut shot. I mean, I could probably stick both of my fists in this hole. It was the biggest hole I've ever seen, but I felt terrible. So I'm like, why did that happen? I come home, shoot the same broadhead into my target outside, and it flies fine. So I'm like, well, dang, I guess I did pull it, right? Like,
Right.
had to have. Well, fast forward a week later, the guys from BPA come on, and I tell them this story, and they start laughing. They're like, "You want to know what happened?" They were like, "Check that retention clip on
Yeah,
that
the
broadhead."
retention clip was broke.
It wasn't broke, but it was like worn out where it clipped
Oh,
in.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, and dude, I had a whole system with that broadhead. I would check the blades, as I'm in the tree and checking it, pull the arrow out, make sure they're all tight. I didn't do that day. and
Right.
it opened up mid-flight. And so ever since then, I have only shot fixed blades. I have nothing against mechanicals, but it goes back to what you said earlier, like, what your dad would say is, well,
Right.
stuff that can go wrong. And it's,
Right.
you know,
See, but I like to play devil's advocate because like on a fixed blade, yeah, there's nothing that could go wrong as far as performance, but like when it hits the target, but what about planing? What about flight characteristics? What
mhm.
about, that stuff could go wrong.
Oh yeah.
Like if you got a heavy wind and you're shooting a cutthroat,
Oh,
like
good
dude,
luck.
it's gonna plane. Like
Yeah.
it's gonna plane. Like it just is. So like typically I keep two fixed blades and three mechanicals in my quiver. And because I am not afraid, I tell people this all the time. Even when I was recurve hunting, I've shot animals at 3 yards. I've shot animals at 97 yards. With mechanicals, fixed blades, I don't care. I've shot animals everywhere in between. I've shot stuff with a recurve at 45 yards. I've shot stuff with
Jesus.
a compound at 97, with a mechanical.
Yeah.
But I feel, even though I know my bow is tuned and I know it shoots really well, and I only do all my long distance tuning with fixed blades, I don't do them with mechanicals. I feel way more confident when I'm out west sending a mechanical past 60 yards than I
Mhm.
do with a fixed blade. Even though I know that the fixed blade is gonna shoot just fine,
Mhm.
in my mind, I'm like, well, it's a little more windy at 12,000 feet in Colorado than it is at 1,000 feet here in southeastern Minnesota.
Yeah.
So for me, I am like, you know, maybe I should probably just send a mechanical because I feel a lot more confident in its flight characteristics
Yeah.
than I do with a big fixed blade, right? Um, Now sub 50 yards, I'm gonna shoot a fixed blade.
Yeah.
I am. But past 50 yards, I'm almost always gonna shoot a mechanical. And past 70 yards, I'm always going to shoot a mechanical, but that situation has to be perfect. And I want to be clear in that, in saying that like I don't just like go out hunting and okay, here's a 200-inch buck at 70 yards. I'm going to just send it. No, that deer has to be relaxed. He's got to be feeding. He's got to not know I'm there. It's got to be a somewhat calm wind. I got to make sure that my pin float is good. There's a lot of things before I even consider taking a shot past 70 yards
Yeah.
that have to be in play for me to do that. But that's just me going, I'm okay not filling my tag.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are not okay not filling their tag, and I'm okay not filling my tag. So
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people don't have that, you know, discipline, and it took me a while
yeah,
to do that too. Like, my target buck last year had him at 45 or 50. I can't remember. Wasn't a good shot. There was branches in the way and I could have tried, but it was the second week of season. And I'm like, dude, I have 5 more months or 4 more months to try and get this deer. Why would I waste it now? Potentially wound him and kill him and not find him, you know?
right.
So
I
yeah,
told you about my mule deer this year, didn't I? The
I
big one that
think
I
you
didn't
did.
shoot.
No, no,
The
no.
I had a 170-inch mule deer that I sat on for 45 minutes. At seven, or it was 12 yards. I
Oh
sat
yeah,
on
you did tell me about
I
this.
I
Yeah.
sat on him at 12 yards for 45 minutes, and he stood up, and I was ready. I came to full draw, but I was gonna walk down on him. I was gonna stand up. I was gonna draw, stand up, and just walk up to him and shoot him in his bed. But I kept looking at him through my binos and I could not tell which way he was bedded. I couldn't tell if he was bedded broadside to me, if he was bedded quartering away. I knew he wasn't quartering to me because I could see his head was facing away from me, and I could see like the way his neck kind of curled. But there's a sage bush right underneath about where I could see his ears. So
Mm,
I could see his antlers, I could see his head, but I couldn't see which way he was bedded.
mhm,
And I was like 80% confident that he was bedded facing directly away from me.
mm,
And so if I would have walked down on him, I would have had to like it would have been like a very narrow window.
yeah.
And even at 12 yards, I could have done it for sure. But I just didn't feel right. And he stood up, and sure enough, he was bedded directly away from me. And I was at full draw with a 550 grain arrow. I could have Texas heart shot him and been totally fine.
Yeah.
But the bow hunter in me, I was like, this is a really risky shot on a stud buck. I don't know if I want to take this shot. And I just sat there at full draw. He turned, and I was waiting for him to kind of notice me and like turn his head. And you know how like when they notice something that's behind them, they'll kind of like shimmy their body.
Hmm.
And I was holding my pin right where he would be if he shimmied. And I was like ready to just start pulling through my hinge and just make that shot right when he turned. And he looked at me, and then he just looked back forward and ran
Mm.
straight away. Like he never shimmied and like squared up to me. So I never got the shot, and I just let down, and I was like, well, it is what it is, try
Yeah.
to get on him
It happens.
tomorrow. I mean, but you know, you say discipline. I say that it's just like I also realize I have a lot of opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm lucky enough that like all I care about all year is bow hunting. It's all I think about. I don't take vacation in the summer ever. Like never. I
Yeah.
never ever take vacation. All my vacation is used for hunting trips. I have a lot of opportunity to be in the woods and bow hunt. So like I'm okay saying, "Hmm, it's probably not an opportunity I should take today." You know,
Yeah.
um, Last day, maybe I'll push it a little bit and extend my limits, but never gonna do something that I've only wounded one deer in my life, and that's all I ever plan on wounding is
Yeah.
one because I'm just very, very patient and very okay not releasing an arrow. Um, I don't know. Maybe it's just maturity in my my
Well,
hunting days,
it's our responsibility though as bow hunters. I'm like, that's why it kills me to this day that I wounded that doe. Because if I sent you the photo of where this shot was, you would say, how in the world did you not kill that deer? Because it was perfect. She was quartered away, but not extremely. And I tucked it behind the shoulder and let the arrow go, dude. And I heard the loud, crack. And I'm like, okay. As soon as she's running off, I'm like, that's either the shoulder that's broken. And I was using a fixed blade. It was a
right?
Q80 Exodus. I was like, that's either the shoulder that broke or my arrow is broken. But she ran off with the arrow. So I'm like, it's got to be the shoulder. I spent 2 hours looking for her. Then it started raining and it was like 10 o'clock at that point. And I'm like, man, this is a 1 acre property. I can't just go stomping around everybody around here. And
Right.
so, yeah, I technically, I want to say I've only wounded one. I've honestly wounded two. But I think the first one died. This was years ago. Never found her. Fixed blade, terrible blood trail. Got covered in seed ticks. It was not a fun time. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, man, I don't know. But look, before we wrap this up, I want to get you back on over the summer, and there's so many more things that I want to talk to you about.
Right.
Um, but where can people find you? How to, say there's some listeners that are like, oh, I want to give Bergy a chance to work on my bow. Like, how do people get in contact with you and I guess
Yeah.
find you?
Yeah, typically 95% of the messages go through my Facebook. If you guys don't have Facebook, I have Instagram, I have TikTok, I got YouTube. You guys can hit me up, and I can give you my phone number. I don't just like publicly post my phone number all over. It's out there if you need to find it, but typically Facebook is the number one spot. Otherwise, my website, bergybowsmith.com. On my website, you guys can also find like I write articles from time to time and put them out there. Sometimes I share them, sometimes I don't. It depends on what I'm doing that day, whether it gets shared or not. So there's a lot of good information in there that you guys can read from. Not only I do want to make this known as well. I don't only just tune people's bows too. Like if you're having a tuning issue, I'm not gonna charge you to help you fix it. Like if you have a problem, just let me know. I'll let you know based on my experience. And then if everything works out good, like, hey man, good on you. Congratulations. Because there's a lot of guys out there that have their own press and want to work on their own bow, but they're scared that they're going to mess something up on their $2,000 bow.
Yep.
And I get it. I get it. I totally get it. Hit me up. I'll show you how to use your press. I'll FaceTime you. I'll help you with your form. I'll help you with if you want to learn a hinge. I'll help you learn a hinge. If if you can't get something to bear shot, like just let me know. Like I am not in this to become rich or become famous. I'm in this to create better bow hunters, more successful bow hunters, so that and more friends. I just
Yeah.
want friends. I just want archery friends that like the same stuff as me and want to
Yeah.
go hunting and share information. That's what I'm about. That's what I like to do. That's my thing. Like yeah, I do have to charge for certain things because my time is worth something as well.
Mhm.
But for the vast majority, like a lot of things are quick fixes that somebody just needs an outside perspective on. So do not be afraid to hit me up if you have any questions, and I'd be more than happy to help you out.
Yeah, man, I can fully testify with that because you did that for me. So
Yeah.
he's not lying, guys.
I tell this story to a couple people. There's a good buddy of mine. He's a good customer of mine. His name is Joe Blake. Super cool guy. He's got two brand new bows, and he's like, dude, I would send my bow to you, but I have a press. He goes, I really want to know how to do this, but like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I was like, okay, let me walk you through it. From start to finish, I walked him through setting up both of his Hoyts. He has an RX-7 and an RX-8. We set both of these bows up, bullet holes at 15 yards. He goes out, shoots fixed blades and field tips at 60 yards, and they're hitting together. And he goes, dude, I've never shot this good at 60 yards. I was like, well, Joe, not to be a douchebag, but you did not just get magically really good at archery overnight. I'm
Yeah.
like, your bow is just perfectly tuned now. And he's like, man, I've been missing out. I always thought I just sucked at archery. And I was like, dude, it is what it is. He's like, well, what do I owe you? I was like, nothing. I was like,
Yeah.
we're friends. Like, let's just be friends. How about that? But obviously I can't do that for everybody,
Yeah.
otherwise I'd be answering questions all day. But like in the right situation where I can really tell that you really just genuinely want to learn and become better, yeah, I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna help you out. So to all the listeners out there, um, if you're having a problem or you have a question, like just let me know. Whether you take my advice or not, I'm just saying it's an open door,
Yeah.
to ask
Doing
the
the Lord's
question.
work, man.
I'm
Awesome,
trying.
Bergy. Awesome, dude. Well,
Hey
look,
man,
I
I
appreciate it.
appreciate it.
Yeah, dude, of course. We're definitely gonna get you on over the summer. And then hopefully you get a lot more traction from this. And I will be bothering you probably after I get my new dialed sight because Lord knows I'm not smart enough to work on that. I could bother Scott, but he's busy as it is. So
Right.
awesome, man. Well, thank you for coming on, brother. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.